We are going to have our basically keynote speaker today, Dr. Kevin Walton.
So this is a funding opportunity that myself and Will Ackland have put together, and it's been re-released, and it's a focus on device-based treatments for substance use disorders. So our mission is to use science as a vehicle to improve the management of drug addiction and its medical consequences, including HIV. And our emphasis is on identification, evaluation, and development of safe and effective treatments for substance use disorders. And our goal is to move new treatments to the next step in the FDA process. So in the last iteration, or the first iteration of this funding announcement, we were able to support 6 studies. 4 of them were for opioids, 2 of them were tobacco, and you can see we do support a number of different technologies, DCS. And then lastly, we are ready to discuss with you, your specific aims, your ideas, thoughts about how you might do a UG3 versus a U.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good night. We have people from different parts of the world joining us today. Today, we are going to start the 5th webinar from International Network of tES, TMS Trials. Right now, we have people from China and India, then to the other part of the world in US and in Brazil. So we have people from different countries across the world. I'm really happy to open 5th webinar in this series. And in this series, we are going to talk about some new advances and topics. And I hope that you all will enjoy the discussions that we are going to have today. Just some housekeeping issues before getting started. First of all, as you know, we record the video of the sessions, and we will put the videos publicly available on YouTube. So if you have any issue in terms of your video being recorded or your discussions would be publicly shared with others, please do not share anything that you are not interested to be publicly available after the meeting. So this is the way that we are providing opportunities for others to be able to see the meetings. And if you have any issues after the meeting, you can just send us an email in the next 24 hours to let us to remove those pieces from the video that we are going to publish. We always open the discussions for question and answers, so we'll have time for questions and answers. And especially if you already have the chat space, so you can see the chat space area, please find the chat space area, getting sure that you will be able to have access to that. We ask people to type their questions in the chat area, and then the speakers would have this opportunity to see the questions, and they can address those questions in their discussions. And we recommend people to actively engage in the discussions. We can have up to 25 cameras, active cameras. So those who are interested to share their cameras, that would be nice to be a part of the discussions. What you can do is, in this new version of GoToMeeting, you can select which camera is going to be displayed on your screen. So when you turn on the GoToMeeting platform, there is you can see on the top that you already can see just view everyone option, but you can change that to just view who's talking or view just the active camera. That would give you a better view if you like to just see the video of the speaker. So that would make things a little bit easier for those who are interested to just see the speakers. And then this is the agenda of the webinar that we are going to have today. We are going to have a 2 hours series of different talks. The first part is devoted to the granting opportunities at NIDA. I will introduce you what we are going to have in the first part, and in the second part we are going to talk about adaptations that we are taking for COVID situation, the pandemic situation across the world, and we will have speakers from different parts of the world discussing about guidelines and potentials that we have to deal with the complexities with pandemic across the world. So these are the main 2 pieces of the meeting. But before getting started, we will have a few minutes, something like 5-6 minutes. We already have people, different people right now We already have 60 people online. So it would be nice if those who are available right now, at least few people to introduce themselves to just start the discussions, and then we can move forward for the next part, which is going to be happening in the next few minutes. So let me see the videos. Probably can even ask people. Okay. Tony, could you introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Hamid. I'm Tony George. I am a professor at the University of Toronto and a clinical scientist at the Center for Addiction Mental Health in Toronto, and I'm going to be presenting some of our work on RTMS for cannabis use in schizophrenia.
Good. Dr. Stile Wogan from Yale. Do introduce yourself.
Good morning, Hamid. Thanks for putting this together. These are really a lot of fun to see across the world and what they're doing. I'm Vaughn Steele. I'm an assistant professor at Yale. I'm setting up a lab using ITBS to try to modulate circuits in cocaine users and opiate users with MRI and EEG to measure those circuits, with the ideal to develop new treatments to treat opioids and cocaine users.
Good. Good to have you here. So others that we have, I'm trying to find the names. Eduardo.
Hi, I'm new here. I'm an assistant professor at UNAM in Mexico, and I work with RTMS in cocaine users, also for therapeutics and using neuroimaging as well, and also working with rodents and macaques, so 3 species. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Michael Wesley.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly well.
Hi, I'm Michael Wesley. I'm the director of the Neurobehavioral Systems Lab at the University of Kentucky, currently using several TMS protocols in combination with cannabis delivery to study value-based decision-making in people with cannabis use disorder.
Good. Great to have you, Michael, with us.
Thank you.
Others that we have, Owen. Can you hear us?
Yeah, hi. My name's Owen, Owen Fielding. I work with a company called Net Recovery Corp, a US company. We've developed a unique TES device. We're working with NIDA and FDA at the moment to have this device cleared for use in the US. It already is cleared for use as a medical device in the UK and Europe.
Good. Good. Others who are interested to kind of introduce themselves. Betty Jo.
Hi, thanks. I'm Betty Jo Samran. I'm at the National Institute on Drug Abuse, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing Colleen's talk because we've got a protocol treating cocaine dependent folks with TMS that we started when Vaughn was here, and we're hoping to get back in business in the next month or so. So looking forward to her comments.
Good. Harry Liu.
Hello, hi, this is Harry Liu or Hanbin Liu. I work in the National Institute on Drug Abuse. We developed focal TMS, and we're now applying this technique to drug addiction model in rats. Thank you.
Good to have you, Harry, here. Alireza Valian.
Hi, my name is Alireza Valian. I'm a PhD candidate in strategic management. And I work on the neurocognitive aspects of managerial decision making, as a matter of fact. And the field of addiction medicine is very interesting for me because of the decision making deficits that normally people with substance drug abuse are facing with. And I'm now thinking about using these sort of stimulations, of course, techniques to modulate the neurocognitive aspects of decision making, of course, in the context of management. But I'm very looking forward to hearing your insightful ideas and things about the stimulation techniques and challenges, and that's why I'm here, and I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for the chance.
Good to have you, Alireza, with us. Alessandra?
Hi, I'm Alessandra Felice. I'm a professor at the University of Padova, and we have a neurostimulation lab. We worked in the past with addiction, cocaine addiction, particularly, and alcohol addiction, and we are now trying to move to neurological disorders. particularly studying how neuromodulation affects EEG. So the co-registration of TMS and EEG, it's one of our fields of interest. And I'm glad to be here to share with you how to carry on in this period. In Italy, we had a very tough spring, I have to say.
Great to have you, Alessandra, with us. As you can see here, we already have Dr. Bixson, Maron Bixson, and Colleen Hanlon, who are basically the founders of this network. And Colleen and Maron, do you want to say hello?
My name is Colleen Hanlon. I'm at Wake Forest University, and I use TMS to evaluate people with alcohol use disorder and smoking and cocaine and pain and all kinds of things. It's great to see you all here. I feel like I know some of you, and I'm really excited to get to know some others. And Hamed is very humble when he says that Maron is behind like organizing it, because really he does all the hard work. So thanks, Hamed, for bringing this together yet again.
Thank you for supporting and joining us. Maron.
Hi, so my name is Maron Bixson. I'm a professor of biomedical engineering at the City College of New York, and I'm very interested in using engineering tools to try to make non-invasive brain stimulation more specific and more effective. And as Colleen was saying, it's really Hamed who has made all this happen. And so thanks to him, and it's wonderful to see all of you.
Thank you, Maron. Thank you, Maron, for joining. Now we have several other speakers. We will have time to kind of ask them to introduce themselves when they want to kind of present their talks. So let's move forward to the next part. We are going to have our basically keynote speaker today, Dr. Kevin Walton. Dr. Walton is the chief of clinical research grants branch in the division of therapeutics and medical consequence at the National Institute of Drug Abuse at NIH. And Dr. Walton received his PhD in pharmacology from Johns Hopkins University. Then for a while, he was an assistant professor at the University of Michigan. And then he moved to pharmaceutical companies, and he was involved in lots of really exciting things in drug discovery for something like 15 years in different pharmaceutical companies. And then he moved to NIH in 2010, and he has been in NIDA since 2013. And he is doing lots of different really exciting jobs at NIDA. And other than all his scientific kind of achievements and brilliant scientific career, he has a really really interesting personality. I have always kind of been inspired by his supportive kind of attitude towards especially young investigators, and I have always kind of really enjoyed talking with Dr. Walton. I'm really excited that we have Dr. Walton here today with us. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Walton. And Dr. Walton, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Hamed. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I'm going to take you with me wherever I need to go to introduce me, because that's the best one I've ever heard. Thank you so much. You're so generous.
You can start sharing your screen.
Great. Thank you so much for this invitation, and thank you all for your time in giving me this opportunity to share some information about this funding opportunity. So this is a funding opportunity that myself and Will Acklin has put together, and it's been re-released recently, and it's a focus on device-based treatments for substance use disorders. Before I get into the FOA, I want to talk to you a little bit about the division I work at NIDA, Division of Therapeutics and Health Consequences, to give you a better idea of how this funding opportunity fits into the larger efforts that we do in the Division of Therapeutics and Health Consequences. So let's see. There we go. So in 1990, Congress mandated NIDA to establish a pharmacotherapy development program. And this was because it was clear that the pharmaceutical industry was not focused on developing treatments for addiction. And so because industry wasn't really focusing on that, somebody needed to. And so NIDA, the National Institute on Drug Abuse, seemed a logical choice for that. And so in response, NIDA created the Medications Development Division, which is now the Division of Therapeutics and Medical Consequences. So our mission is to use science as a vehicle to improve the management of drug addiction and its medical consequences, including HIV. And our emphasis is on the identification, evaluation, and development of safe and effective treatments for substance use disorders. So the overall scope of our division is both preclinical and clinical research of pharmacological, behavioral, digital device, and integrated treatments. So you see it's a broad umbrella of any kind of new treatments for substance use disorders. And we're actually divided much like a pharmaceutical company. We have a chemistry branch, a preclinical branch, clinical branch, regulatory, and medical branches. So we're really designed to be able to integrate all those specific expertise to move treatments forward. We also, our charge is to look at medical consequences for drug abuse. So for example, previous slide, I mentioned HIV, and so a lot of, in the HIV population, substance abuse is higher than the general population. And so these kinds of issues that are associated with drug abuse, we are charged to look at. We support research to identify valid or reliable outcome measures for clinical trials. So most trials in the FDA primarily accepts abstinence as the primary endpoint for treatment. But we know that some substance abuse individuals, like people who have cannabis use disorder, they don't want to necessarily stop. They just want to be able to get their lives back. And so we support research to develop quality of life measures that would be a viable endpoint instead of abstinence. And then training. We definitely support young investigators because we really want the next generation of individuals to come forward and bring their ideas forward for developing new treatments. So you can see that this FOA, device-based treatments, is really solidly within the larger umbrella of the areas that we focus on in our division. And it became clear as TMS was approved for depression, and researchers showed interest in applying this for substance use disorders, that we really needed to get more involved and really support the academic as well as industry investigators to really do what we could to support this area of research and help move it forward more quickly. So before I get into the details, I know there's a lot of people, international investigators, obviously, based upon the name of this organization, and I just want to let you know that while we're funded U.S. federal money, we do support research outside the U.S. And if international investigators want to apply for funding, a really important aspect is that you need to be able to explain why the expertise you bring or your facilities or something about what you have is unique, and that might not be accessible within the U.S. And so we have funded research outside the U.S. and we'll continue to do so, but you need to be able to bring that, have that explanation about what you bring is unique. And I can answer more questions about that later if there are questions. So this FOA seeks to accelerate the development of device-based treatments, and our goal is to move new treatments to the next step in the FDA process. We want to generate FDA-authorized device-based SUD treatments, and our goal is to get these treatments out to people who are seeking treatment, and so the way we usually do that is by, if you can get FDA authorization, then that provides the the financial incentives to be able to do that. So applications should describe how the proposed studies will move this through the FDA authorization pathway. And then finally, I want to mention that review for this FOA is done by a special review panel. And it's so the reviewers have expertise focused on devices and SUDs. So these are people who are well familiar with the area, and so when you come in with your application, they can understand what devices have been used for, what the value is, and really can understand what you're bringing forward and give a more in-depth review than, say, a general review panel might be able to. And so that's why we're really excited about having this as a special review. So this is a phased award. It's a UG3, UH3, and it's not very common, so I just want to spend a little bit of time explaining what that means. So there's two phases, UG3, UH3. The UG3 is the first phase, and it funds up to 2 years, and it supports a project with specific milestones to be completed by the end of that period. UG3 projects that meet their milestones will be considered by NIDA and prioritized for the UH3 phase. So I want to explain what that means. So you submit your application, and then it goes to this special review panel, and they review the entire application. But what we're going to fund is actually the UG3 portion first. And so we will, if the application gets selected for funding, we will fund those first 2 years. At the end of the UG3, the investigator will actually make a presentation to us in program at NIDA, and we'll talk about what the UG3 accomplished, how they met their milestones, and what they plan to do for the UH3. And so NIDA program it's called administrative review. So we will evaluate whether those milestones are made and then decide about whether we should fund the UH3 phase. So that's why these milestones really need to be specific and quantitative, because we want to know whether they are met and whether you achieve the things that you want to achieve, and then we can decide from there whether to go to the UH3. So the UH3, if it gets approved, that will fund up to 3 additional years following the completion of the UG3, and it's really going to be the phase that's go on the next step to move the intervention forward. So the UH3 really should be based upon the outcome measures that you are planning to get from the UG3. So even though what we're funding initially is the UG3, the applications must address both the UG3 and the UH3 phases. The UH3 is probably will be a little bit less specific because it's going to be based on the outcomes of UG3, and you don't know what specific data you're going to get and how to design the UH3. UG3 will be much more specific and have the details, much more detailed protocol about what you're planning to do. But both those phases need to be in the application because reviewers need to see over that full length of 5 years what you expect to accomplish. So the UG3, as I mentioned, to provide clear and measurable milestones. This is a list of milestones that you might consider. I just want to focus on some key points in each of these. So mechanism of action. You might want to specifically, how is the device working, and you can provide us data on really what that mechanism is. Target engagement. Can you show us that, okay, if it's working in this, say, this particular brain region, can you show us that that brain region is actually engaged? Efficacy-related endpoints, such as craving, independence, days of abstinence. These need to be specific. What results do you expect to get out, and what would you call success? Same thing with behavioral-related endpoints. Working memory, impulsivity, self-regulation. You need to describe these clearly, and what level of effect do you expect to see? Safety tolerability. Maybe the intervention is much earlier, and you just want to show that it's safe and has tolerability. What would you call a success? FDA feedback. So again, we're talking about FDA authorization. So at the end of the UG3, you may go to the FDA and say, okay, we want to do an efficacy study in the UH3. This is what the measures we want to use based upon our UG3 results. Is this study acceptable? These could be IDE enabling studies. And so what would you expect to see? And then UG3 actually could involve the filing of an IDE as a milestone. And then, of course, it could be a proof of concept feasibility clinical trial. Again, we want very specific quantifiable measures. So the UH3 supports the next logical stage of development, as I said, and so it could be a demonstration of efficacy, development of measures that quantify the target engagement, brain function, functional endpoints, imaging, abstinence, behavioral measures, but it should be, again, that next stage that you expect to see. And then, of course, it could be a relationship between target engagement and the functional outcomes, biomarkers, and other functional measures. If you're going to be integrating a behavioral treatment with the device, then we would like to know that the behavioral intervention is actually doing something, that it's not just something thrown on top because, oh, more is better. We want to know that that actually has an effect and needs to be included. So I just want to give you a few details about the application itself. So the next deadline, actually the first deadline for this newly released FOA is December 15th. So that's a few months from now. There's 2 deadlines every fiscal year. So in December and August, and then this will go through August of 2023. The budget, obviously a really important point. UG3 is limited to $500,000 direct costs per year for 2 years. And then the UH3, the budget doesn't have a limit, but it needs to reflect the actual needs of the proposed project. So budget is a really important aspect in regards to what we're able to fund. So we only have a limited amount of funding, and we want to fund as many of the best projects that we can. And the more expensive projects are, the more limited the number of projects we can fund. So I'm not asking you to you need to have the funds to do the study that you want to do, but do your best to make sure you're just requesting the funds that you need, and that it's a well-designed study that's really going to answer those questions. And we're really interested in the development of new treatments. Sort of basic research questions, they're really, really exciting, and we'd love to see that kind of research done. But we need to focus on development treatments. That's the function of our division, and so the research needs to be focused on that. So in the last iteration, the first iteration of this funding announcement, we were able to support 6 studies. 4 of them were for opioids, 2 of them were tobacco, and you can see we did support a number of different technologies, TDCS, vagal nerve stimulation, deep brain stimulation, TMS, and theta burst. This information is all public, and you can go to NIH Reporter. It's a terrific website that NIH has. So you can look up all funded research, and you can go ahead and get the abstracts for these, and see when they were funded, who the PIs are, and if you're thinking about submitting to this FOA, I think it's a really useful tool to see what's been funded. So a couple of final thoughts I want to give you about this funding opportunity. So we define devices very broadly. So we're talking about both central and peripheral interventions. And so if, so outside TES and TMS, which you can see we definitely support that research, we are open to other types of interventions, other type of central interventions, or as well as peripheral interventions. I know we funded a study not through this FOA on heart rate variability, and so if you have a device that measures that and you're showing that that has a it could be used as a treatment, as part of a treatment for substance use disorder, that could be considered within this FOA. We're trying to be as as broad an umbrella as possible to bring in new devices. Again, I know I'm hitting on this an awful lot, but it's a really important point. Our goal is to get validated interventions that are broadly disseminated. We really want to bring new treatments to this treatment-seeking population, and that's where we're focused on with this FOA, and really with all our our efforts that we focus on for treatment development. And then lastly, we are ready to discuss with you, your specific aims, your ideas, thoughts about how you might do a UG3 versus a UH3. So this is the email address for myself as well as Will Ackland, and you can feel free to reach out to us, and we're more than glad to provide more information or whatever information you need to help you consider this funding opportunity. So I hope that wasn't too much of a whirlwind, but I'm really happy to answer any questions you have about this funding opportunity or what we do in our division.
Thank you, Kevin. What we are going to do is just we are going to open the floor for discussions and questions. So we have the chat space. If you want to kind of make your question on the chat space, you can just type the question that you have in the chat space. And those who want to ask questions directly, you can just turn on your video and just kind of raise your hands. Or if you are on phone and you cannot turn on your video, just jump in and kind of ask your question, and we'll try to consider those questions. Okay, we have a question from Tony. Tony, do you want to go ahead?
Hi, good, Kevin. Thanks a lot for your presentation. Just had a question. So the UG3 phase is obviously a preliminary study. That sounds almost like an R21. If you have promising results, is there the possibility of having a multi-site study funded for the UH3 phase, if so indicated?
Yeah, that would be fine. We really don't define what there's no limitations to that, but it really needs to be the next stage. We really want to see a logical progression from what's in the UG3 to the UH3. If a study of a large size you think is what's right, then that's fine. But you're right. The UG3 is kind of like an R21, but it's a little bit supercharged. There's a little bit more money in there than an R21 because clinical studies are expensive, and so we want to make sure that we can enable those as much as we can.
Thank you, Kevin.
Eduardo.
Thanks for the talk. I wanted to ask if so it's basically the same FOA as the one that expired this year. I imagine the 18494, I guess. And if so, are there any differences between those, or is it the same, just basically a follow-up?
Yeah, it is basically the same. But what we did is, over the years, we've had a lot of discussion with investigators, both ones who submitted and ones who were thinking about submitting. And the budget for the UG3 is more limited in the previous iteration. And so we tried to make it more accessible by increasing the budget limit to $500,000 per year. But otherwise, it was pretty identical.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Kevin, thanks. So I'm just curious, functionally and somewhat concordant, people may be interested in patent landscapes. So is there any part during the phased innovation program where you're going to be interested in hearing anything about patentability? Are there resources available to include that in studies, or is that something that needs to be worked out between investigators and institutions and businesses beforehand? Just curious about that.
So I'm not sure I quite understand. So you're talking about using the patent, patenting as a milestone, and then having funds put aside for that?
So that could be one way that it plays out. I think that if people are interested in developing devices, there's also a commercial interest. And so I know the research and the studies, the safety, the efficacy, demonstrating mechanism is very important. Simultaneously, if there's an opportunity for something to be patented down the road, there can be roadblocks associated with that process. So you kind of see what I'm getting at. Spending a lot of money up front on something that may have limited commercial availability later in the instance that someone's developing a new tool.
Yeah, so we're very interested in anything that enables the device to become a commercial product. So So if you can provide information about patentability and and have that as part of the overall process going forward, we would really be interested in hearing that, because that's going to give us more confidence that the investigator has considered these kinds of issues and is dealing with it. So yeah, we would definitely want to hear about those kinds of details.
Yeah, just trying to predict roadblocks on the back end after a lot of money has been spent on the likelihood that something could be rolled out, obviously.
Right. Yeah. So and it's the same thing. I mean, this is a little bit more newer area for us than, say, medications, but it's the same issue with medications. We want to know what the patent life for that medication is going to be, and that a company is actually going to, want to take that forward. So it's the same thing with the devices.
Thank you.
So I'm going to just read this. This is from Harry Liu. Does this RFA have any interest in funding device-based treatment in animal models of drug dependence? So yes. So this allows both clinical and preclinical studies. So if you wanted to do research on preclinical to validate the technology, then we certainly that certainly can be considered as an application in this FOA.
William Lechner.
Yeah, hi Kevin. Bill Lechner here. Nice to see you. I just had a question, again, sticking with the comparison of the UG3 phase 2 and R21. Is there a difference in how far along the concept should be in terms of feasibility data versus the need to show initial efficacy of treatment for that mechanism?
Well, so you see, the goal of UG3 is to de-risk the project, right? And have this larger UH3 that follows. So in that way, it's very similar to an R21, and we're certainly willing to consider projects with a limited preliminary data, but then it's a cost-benefit ratio, or risk return, and so the cost of that study should be commensurate with the level of preliminary data. Is that helpful?
Absolutely. Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate it.
Dr. Baker.
Yes, thanks. That's great information, and I've been in the process of applying for this. But I'm just kind of curious, how receptive is this to, apart from clinical outcomes like craving, relapse? What about RDUC-based outcomes? If your aim is to kind of improve reward processing, cognitive control, are these sort of avenues that we could take, or is this not really geared for that yet?
Well, so if you're going to your outcome, we're open to different outcomes, and the examples I gave are just examples. They're not saying, oh, you have to have a list, but it's just always useful to have some examples to give you an idea of the things that we're going to consider. So as long as these are outcomes that you think are appropriate for to confirm that the mechanism of action or target engagement, then that would be fine. Now, obviously, we want to get to the point where we're going to see measures that are specifically related to addiction. But I think we're not limiting. We don't want to limit you to what you think are limit your ability to identify reasonable outcomes that make sense for the study you're planning.
Okay, and the same with the population too, because a lot of these kind of RDUC type of outcomes are kind of common across all substance use disorders, whether it's opiate or alcoholism. But are these more geared towards specific substance use disorders, or more general kind
of studies? Once you get to efficacy studies, you really need to focus on a particular substance use disorder, because then reviewers are going to say, well, you have this mixed population. Some people use one substance, some people use another. They're really different populations. You can't say, abstinence in anybody who has a substance use disorder. I mean, I'm being a little, flippant about that, perhaps. But if you're talking just about, you know, I don't know, addiction circuitry, then that might not be so specific. But if you, but once you get to an efficacy level, you really need to focus on specific addictions.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Any other questions? Colleen.
Yeah, Kevin, thanks so much for coming to speak to us. Yeah. So I have just a kind of a more general question. So most of us on this call were raised as scientists and not as companies, and we were never really raised to learn how to actually go to the FDA. So if that's the ultimate goal of this FOA, which is awesome, I think we'd all like to help people, does NIDA give us any help and training in how to go from our research papers and stuff to conversations with the FDA to kind of go the final, you know, few yards?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm really glad you brought that up because that's a really important point. We have, so as I mentioned, we have a regulatory branch that routinely works with the FDA. We can give guidance on how you should formulate your inquiries to the FDA. We have actually a memorandum of understanding with the Center for Devices at FDA, and so we are in regular contact with individuals over at CDRH, and so you know we can help you get make sure your inquiry goes to the right individual over at FDA, so we can provide you know all that help about interacting with the FDA, and when they respond, help you decipher what those responses mean and what the difference between should and could and all those things that are really important. But yes, we'll definitely more than glad to help people working with the FDA.
Okay, Dr. Walton, we have in several parts of that specific kind of FOA discussing about IDE and kind of asking for IDE, and I heard that there are some kind of updates from kind of receiving IDE for some of the kind of home-based TDCS device. I think it was on depression. And could you tell us more about the IDE and the kind of the process that people should apply for IDE, and if there is a specific consideration for that?
Yeah. So how FDA works with devices is very different than how they work with medications, and many of the devices that you all work with are considered low risk, and you don't need an IDE or an IDE exemption. And of course the question is, when does that change? At what point? And I think that is I never offer to speak for the FDA, and so it's one. So I think probably at the if it's a new device, then you may need to get that read from the FDA when you're beginning your study about whether that would need an IDE. If it's using devices that have been used a lot before with individuals, then maybe it's the transition from the UG3 to the UH3 when you're thinking about doing this larger efficacy study to reach out to the FDA and ask them, well, do I need an IDE now? And so I think that might be a logical time to do it, especially with a number of these devices which are considered low risk. And we can help you make those contacts. But it's really up to the FDA to decide when something needs an IDE and when it doesn't. And we always defer to them because they're the final arbiters about authorization. So it's not very informative. I apologize for that, but it's kind of how pretty much we work it. But then, like I told, so with Colleen, we love to work with individuals as they work with the FDA and help them navigate.
Thank you. And we have another question in the chat space asking about how many grants are going to be reviewed and getting funded this year.
So we never discuss the number of applications that are for review. So that's a standard rule for NIH. And there is no set aside for this FOA. And the reason why we do that is because we fund the studies that, you know, with the amount of money that we have, we fund the studies that deserve to be funded. And we have funded some of these device, you know, more than one device study in a single round. So if good applications come in, then hopefully we'll be able to fund them. You know, we have a lot of priorities. You know, we have medications and digital therapeutics, and there's a lot of different substance use disorders. But so I can't give you a number, but there is a lot of interest, and this goes all the way up to our director, Dr. Nora Volkov, very interested in devices and the potential for these. So, you know, all the way through NIDA, there's interest in devices.
Perfect. We are going to move to the next part if there is no other question right now. Getting sure that we have been discussing with Colleen about the timing of this session, and we decided to kind of open the time in a way to give people enough space to be able to discuss about this really great, kind of important granting opportunity. And we really appreciate NIDA for putting together such a nice, kind of well described. And I'm not sure if those who haven't seen or haven't read the kind of the details of the application, if you just review the text of the application, you kind of the announcement, you can learn a lot about how NIDA is beautifully thinking about the process and the next steps for developing new devices and kind of the new therapeutics for substance use disorder. So thank you very much, Dr. Walton, for putting this really nice granting opportunity together with many colleagues at NIDA. And I'm sure that Dr. Walton would be happy to receive questions by email, and we really appreciate him for joining us today. Okay, so please,
I just want to thank everybody for their attention, and I hope to see a lot of good applications coming in over the next few years.
Good. Thank you, Kevin, for joining us today.